The trouble is, Europeans, as a rule, do not understand the Arab world, not one little bit. And we can find a great example of this lack of understanding in the behaviour of Olaf Scholz, Chancellor of Germany. I'm Granniopteryx. So what happened was this. Olaf Scholz went to speak to the King of Jordan. Olaf Scholz went there with European ideas of looking after refugees. Oh, yes, you've got to look after people who are in distress, who have nowhere else to go. You take them in, you give them the benefits of the welfare state, you school them, you give them clothes, you provide them with hotel rooms. Of course, nothing could be simpler. Completely forgetting that places like Jordan and Egypt don't have welfare states. Well, not that you'd notice, don't have that many hotels, and what they have, they need for tourists who come and visit to bring them a little bit of money. They have teeming populations who have absolutely no second thoughts about bullying people who they regard as outsiders, about killing them. And you'd have a lot of trouble finding ways of prosecuting or even finding these people because there's this tribal, especially in Jordan, tribal society. Somewhat less in Egypt, I think. But yeah, that's for another discussion. So Scholz went there with his sophisticated European ideas, asking the King of Jordan if he will take some refugees from Gaza to help the situation. King of Jordan tells Olaf Scholz, "We won't take refugees from Gaza." He might have used spicier language. I don't know. I can imagine at least he thought spicier language. What happened was that the king said to Scholz, "I think I can speak here on behalf of Jordan, but also our friends in Egypt. This is a red line. No refugees in Jordan and also no refugees in Egypt." Absolutely categorical. And why do you think he's saying that? Well, it's always been the case that the Arab states surrounding Israel and further afield have refused to do anything about the refugees. Allow me to explain. When the Arab states declared war on Israel in 1948, some Arabs stayed in the state of Israel. They're doing okay now. All that stuff about apartheid state is a load of rubbish. They have the same educational and financial opportunities as any other Israeli citizen. And indeed, more and more of them are actually joining the Israeli army. I think probably because they know what will happen to them if the other guys overrun Israel. And a lot of them are also Druze who were very badly kicked around by the Arabs in the area before Israel. The Bedouin too were not that well treated, and the Christians, of course, not well treated at all. They stayed, but others left. Now, some left because the Arab authorities told them to, and some were pushed out by various gangs well, I was going to say in Israel, but it wasn't Israel yet, but yes. And some of them were frightened off. There's a famous massacre called Deir Yassin, which is not forgotten by the Arabs. They're always bringing that up. But it turns out that I think the Stern gang went in there and they killed... I'm not sure of the figures. You'll have to look that up because I just remembered it now. I think they ended up killing about 5 men or maybe 10 people. I'm not entirely sure. It wasn't such a lot, but they certainly frightened the villagers. And then the Arab authorities, you'll find that online as well, they put that into hundreds. Not that there were hundreds in Deir Yassin, but you get the thing. They reported that every woman had been raped, babies had been killed, all the sort of stuff that you're seeing that they're actually doing to Jewish babies now, that was already in their mind. So they made up these lurid stories. And of course, when the Israeli state was just about to be declared, a lot of Arab villagers just thought, no, I can't stick around with these monsters. And they ran. The Arabs actually admitted later on that they'd made a terrible strategic mistake there. I'm not making this up. You can find that online. Okay, now I have some notes here. I was taking notes. I made a video earlier on, and it was talking about Putin and this stuff here, the massacres and all sorts of things. And it got very complicated. The video got about 40 minutes long, and I realised I was just babbling on. So I decided to stop. What a waste of time that was. And now I'm breaking it down into smaller chunks. Right. So the Jordanians and the Egyptians will not take care of their Arab brothers in Gaza or out of Gaza or anything. And neither will any of the other countries, Arab brothers in the area. There's Saudi Arabia, there's Qatar, there's Bahrain, Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. So I have some figures here. Let's just give you some figures. In the United Arab Emirates, 11% of the people in that part of that chunk of land, 11% natives, 89% are foreign nationals. They're mostly from India and Pakistan, I believe. I think there are some from the Philippines as well. In Saudi Arabia, 40% of the population are foreign nationals. There are 18.8 million Saudi and 13.4 million foreign nationals. Again, mostly from, I mean, there will be some European ones, you know, like in staffing hospitals and things like that. But all the dirty work, the building, the sweeping up, you know, that sort of thing, the fetching and carrying, are East Asians of various sorts. Right, Qatar, 88%, no, there are 2.6 million Qatar nationals. 88% of the people there are South Asians. 700,000 are actually Indian. Do I have any more? I thought I had more than that. So we've got Saudi, we've got the UAE. I thought I'd done Bahrain. Obviously not. Well, you get the picture. I don't see any reason for Bahrain to be any different. In other words, they can't run their own countries without a lot of foreign nationals. You might ask, why aren't they taking all the people from Gaza? Or at least the people from Gaza, the innocent peasants who just want to get on with their lives and bring up their families. Their Arab brothers in distress. You know, a little bit of zakat, charity. But they're not doing it. Well, there are several historical reasons for that. And the first is that when there were refugees, just a minute, I'm sorry, I've really got to look something up. And while I'm busy looking up post-war refugee statistics on the internet, I shall remind you that clicking like is the best way you can help my video. I'm Granniopteryx. I'm on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds, also Twitter and Gab. And all the links are in the description, including links to donation sites, I am, of course, very grateful for any donation, but really the best way you can help my channel and this video in particular is to click that like. So please do. Please share it. Please subscribe. And if you are subscribed on YouTube, remember, click the notification bell because then you know when I've uploaded a new video. Okay, back to the mess. Right, I finally found it because I think it's worth looking at. After World War II, there were around 40 million people displaced by that war. It says here, 2 years after the end of the World War in Europe, 850,000 people lived in DP camps across Europe. Among them, Armenians, Poles, Latvians, Lithuanians, Estonians, Yugoslavs, Jews, Greeks, Russians, Ukrainians, Hungarians, Czechoslovaks and Belarusians. 40 million people have been displaced from their home countries, with about 11 million in Allied occupied Germany. These included former prisoners of war, released slave labourers, and both non-Jewish and Jewish concentration camp survivors. So that's a lot of people. Where are they now? Well, they've all been absorbed by their various countries, either not their own or the ones they went to. And now you wouldn't know. I used to have a neighbour, and she told me she was a child in a DP camp. And they had come from Poland, I believe, but they put that behind them. Now, all those people displaced and found places for in other countries, you don't hear of them anymore. And yet we can hear of nothing but the Palestinian refugees. And that's because, as I said, some left Israel voluntarily, some were frightened out, some were pushed out. But the Arab countries that could have taken them didn't. They were using these people as a weapon against Israel and the West. So these poor bloody refugees could not find homes anywhere because their Arab brothers rejected them and told them, yeah, you stay there in the camps, you stew away, you get angry, you go and kill some Israelis for us, and we can't be bothered to do it, but we'll make you miserable enough to do it. And a setup was agreed with the United Nations that these people would remain refugees hereditarily, if that's a word. That is, people who were refugees after the Second World War in Europe, they were settled in other countries one way or another, and now they're citizens of those countries. But in the case of the displaced Arabs from the Israeli-Arab War, it wasn't called the Israeli-Palestinian War at the time, by the way. It was just the Israeli-Arab War because Palestinians weren't a thing at the time. They're refugees down the generations, which is weird. And it's supported by the UN. So you could say the UN has caused all of this. But anyway, the refugees were being used by the Arab countries as a stick with which to beat Israel and the West, because Israel is seen as a representative of the West in their area. And that's what's going on now. The Iranians are using the Palestinian refugees as a stick. They hate Israel, but also everyone knows, including Jordan, by the way, that if Israel were overrun by Hamas-type people, Jordan would be in a lot of trouble. So it turns out that those refugees are being turned against them. Now, I have some notes here. Oh. And In my previous video, I did mention that I thought maybe Putin had been involved in this as well, because he'd had meetings with Hamas over the past 2 years since he started his war with Ukraine. So he's looking for a distraction, and this war between Hamas and Israel is very useful for him, is it not? And that's important as well. It appears that Putin is using those poor bloody Palestinian refugees again. Those poor people, they're just used. They're being kicked around from pillar to post, but not by the Israelis, by their Arab brothers and imperium builders like Putin. I thought that would be an interesting reminder of how heartless people can be. Yeah, so I have a lot of sympathy for Jordan and Egypt. They're both quite poor countries. They're struggling with populations that don't exactly, they're not exactly governable. They don't have ideas about democracy and that sort of thing. There's a lot of, I mean, if there's religious nuttery going on in Israel, it's 10 times worse in Egypt. And they don't want people who've been radicalized living among their population. But the Qataris, the Bahrainis, the Saudis, they could manage some of them at least. They're not having any of it, though. It's too much trouble. Right, well, yeah, that's where the refugees are now in Gaza, those poor people in Gaza. I'm talking about the ones who just want to get on with their lives and raise their children. They could find haven in Arab countries if those Arab countries were prepared to take them on. But no, they make better weapons with destroyed lives and maimed prospects and a constant diet of Israel's responsible for all your problems. No, you guys out there in Gaza, Israel is not responsible for your problems. Saudi Arabia is, Qatar is, Bahrain is. And to a lesser, well, Jordan certainly is, and Egypt. Remember, Egypt was in charge of Gaza for a very long time, until 1967. But when Israel gave the Sinai back to Egypt, Egypt didn't want Gaza. They told the Israelis they could have that hot potato. All right, well, till next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the granniopteryx design or Grambo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.granniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.